So for my first movie back of 2017, I figured I'd tackle an easy topic, Candyman. I mean, there's only 3 movies and they're pretty straightforward tales, so I'm sure it'll be pretty easy, right? Who am I kidding? It's a horror franchise, so it's all screwed up. But first, Candyman, 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 Candyman. What could go wrong? So the first movie starts off by setting up the concept of the Candyman. Ted Raimi tries his best to look like a tough guy, and this girl says Candyman 5 times in a mirror, which causes him to show up and kill her. This turns out to be a story being told to a reporter doing a story on urban legends. There's no date given, but it appears to be set in the era in which it was filmed, so most likely 1992 when the film was released. Helen, the reporter, starts to investigate the story, and of course to prove that it's not real, says his name 5 times in her mirror. Her investigation leads her to Chicago's infamous Cabrini Green, where several people have been rumored to have been killed by the legend, and finds several leads. A stodgy professor fills in Candyman's backstory. He was an artist, son of a slave, who fell in love with a white woman in 1890, when interracial relations were only slightly less accepted than in most southern states today. An angry mob cut off his painting hand, smeared him with honey, and let angry bees sting him to death because 1890 was way more creative with their lynch mobs. He was then burned and had his ashes scattered on the area where Cabrini Green now sits, and then shortly after, Helen encounters the Candyman in a parking garage. His severed hand has been replaced with this snazzy hook, and he tells her that he must shed innocent blood in order to continue his existence. Helen blacks out and wakes up in the green, covered in the blood of one of the residents' dogs, and the resident's baby is now missing. Helen is blamed for the kidnapping and arrested, kicking off the series' trope of framing the female lead. She's released, but Candyman shows up in her apartment right now and kills her best friend, which she again gets blamed for. She attempts to prove her innocence to a prison psychologist by calling the Candyman, who then promptly disembowels the poor guy because, seriously, what did she think was going to happen? That Candyman would show up and testify in her defense? Helen heads back to the green where she finds portraits of his death and finally the man himself, who then shows off his chest of bees while kissing her with bee mouth. Pretty sure that facial expression is not acting. He also tells her that it was always her, which seems to imply that she may be the reincarnation of his 1890 lover. Helen finds the missing baby in a pile of trash outside and tries to save it, but the community thinks it's Candyman and sets the pile on fire. She manages to break loose from Candyman and saves the baby, leaving him to die in the flames, although she is horribly burned in the process and dies. In the end, Helen's husband says her name 5 times in his mirror, and her burned spirit shows up to kill him, and her new portrait on the wall shows that she is now herself a figure of legend. 3 years later, we get a sequel in the form of Candyman 2, Farewell to the Flesh. It was directed by Bill Condon, who went on to win 1 Oscar and get nominated for several more, but yeah, that's not really apparent from this flick. The film starts off strong with the professor character showing up again to recap the origin of the Candyman, revealing his new name to be Daniel Robitaille and his lover's name to be Caroline. He gives a quick recap of the previous film, revealing its setting to be indeed 1992. It's clear some time has passed since the professor has now written a book on the incidents and is on a book tour, so it's fair to say that we're in the year the film was released, 1995, and that 3 years have passed. The professor calls Candyman in order to prove he's not real, and of course gets hooked. Our setting is now New Orleans, and we're introduced to Annie Tarrant. Her father was killed by the Candyman, and her brother is blamed for the professor's murder, causing her to research the legend, and in the process says his name 5 times in a mirror. Of course, this makes the big guy show up, and he reveals that Annie is the descendant of Caroline, and Candyman's great-great-granddaughter. He kills her husband with his hook, and... Wait a minute, how does that work? He just jammed the non-pointy end through him. Annie tears open Daniel's face, revealing bees underneath. She becomes a suspect in her husband's murder, continuing that theme, and then Candyman kills a few more people, including Annie's mom, who I guess would be his great-granddaughter, and Annie gets blamed for that one too. Finally, it turns out that Annie is pregnant, and she finds out that Daniel's soul is trapped in a mirror that was present at the time of his death, and manages to track it down on Ash Wednesday and destroy it. This causes Candyman to turn into a shoddy special effect and fall apart. The movie then bounces ahead a few years, and we're introduced to Annie's daughter Caroline, who's approximately 7 here, so that makes this epilogue set in 2002, and the little brat almost calls Candyman, but is stopped just in time. And then that brings us to Candyman 3, Day of the Dead, and this is where the timeline goes completely off the rails. It was released in 1999, but it's pretty clear that it can't be set at that time, because our lead here is Caroline, Annie's daughter and Candyman's great-great-great-granddaughter, and she's definitely older now. Based on the fact that she attends several functions that include alcohol, she's at least 21, and Donna D'Errico was 21 at the time, so let's go with that. Since Candyman took place on Ash Wednesday, that would mean that Caroline was born near the ending of that year, and since this movie takes place on Day of the Dead in October, that would make the year of its setting, 2017. So Candyman 3 technically hasn't happened yet. Go figure. So Caroline freaking calls up Candyman at a party in order to prove that she doesn't believe him, which is like the number one reason people call up Candyman in these movies, and she does this at the gallery showing of Daniel's artwork in Los Angeles, and then meets him face to face in the series' most unbelievable plot point yet. Caroline meets him alone in the subway in Los Angeles, and there's no one else around, and she's supposed to be downtown. Anyway, she wakes up to find her friends killed, and the police kind of think she did it, but they haven't blamed her yet. But it's a Candyman movie, so you know that they will. She then goes to Patty's pub, her downtown apartment, and tries to come to terms with her mother's suicide, although Annie's played by a different actress here. Candyman and his new hook kill off Caroline's roommate, and he at least has the courtesy to use the pointy end of the hook for once, and Caroline definitely gets the blame for it. She gets arrested, but Daniel sets her loose by not only pushing the front, non-sharp part of the hook through a cop, but also his whole car seat. Everything culminates in the Day of the Dead festival, where Candyman makes some really, really awkward moves towards his own descendant. She destroys the portrait of Daniel, which causes him to burst into flames himself and vanish. A racist cop gets blamed for the murders. Caroline lives happily without being molested by a distant relative covered in bees. So there you have it, 3 movies that kind of flow together, except for maybe the weird time jump on the third one. I think maybe this year I'll head down to the Day of the Dead festival and take a look and see how well this movie predicted the future. So I'm kind of surprised there haven't been more of these, considering how popular the character is, although I have to admit, except for the first one, they really weren't that great, although it's always great to watch Tony Todd in anything. I also want to thank everybody for making 2017 off to a great start. The channel broke 500 subscribers. If you haven't yet, please feel free to subscribe. Feel free to share the video on any social medias that you like. I love to see comments. Please give me some comments. Let me know what other franchises you'd like to see timelines for. And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. And thanks for watching. And